Hi everybody, welcome back. Glad you could tune in again. So I want to continue where we left off at the end of the previous devotion, just thinking about this final aspect of our pledge that we've made as members of the congregation at All Saints to, and I'm quoting, the establishment and maintenance of a covenant Christian household in the way of our Christian faith. That's what we've promised to do. We've looked at some of the background to this already, and we began to look at Ephesians 6 verse 4, which, as I said, goes into a little bit more practical detail about how this pledge is to be worked out in practice. I want to just pick up one residual question from last time that might have been hanging over the previous discussion of the idea of fathers taking responsibility, and then look at the next little clause in Ephesians 6:4. Let me just read it again. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Let me say just a word or two, picking up on a question that might have arisen from last time. Fathers, the question arises, of course, what we might helpfully advise mums to do in situations where, for whatever reason, father is absent. And we can easily imagine circumstances in which a father has left, a father may tragically have died, a father may not be a believer. And we have to deal honestly and openly with the realities of those situations. And as anybody who's been in a single parent family knows, they can be very painful. As anyone who's been in a family where any of those previously mentioned circumstances prevail, they can be difficult and painful. So how should we do this? A couple of thoughts. First, mums, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. That goes without saying, I guess, doesn't it? But you can pray confidently that the Lord knows the particular struggles that you may have and is more than able to meet your needs according to his riches in Christ Jesus. So trust in him. He knows the particular circumstances you're in, and he will meet your needs according to his riches in Christ Jesus. And of course then, secondly, how's he going to meet your needs? Well, he may well meet them in all kinds of practical ways through the church family that you're a part of. And so there may be particular times, or there may be general ways in which you want to reach out to somebody at church. Feel free to contact me or Pastor Neil, one of the other session, or the deacons, or another family in the church where maybe there's a father present who can give you some advice about, I don't know, how to deal with young lads, how to help and encourage teenage boys in particular, that kind of thing. None of this is easy, but it will become less difficult to the extent that we're there for each other. And public commitment here, we really all ought to be there for each other, especially in those kinds of circumstances. So I hope that helps to address the kind of question that might arise when there's nobody who's going to immediately answer the call of fathers. Having got that out on the table, let's just continue looking at the next little clause in verse 4 of Ephesians 6. Do not provoke your children to anger. Elsewhere it's translated, do not exasperate your children, which I think captures wonderfully what Paul has in mind here. What might Paul mean by don't exasperate your kids? Well, presumably it's connected with what he's going to go on talking about in the rest of the verse, because there's a contrastive sense. Don't do this, but do that. And what he says in the next part of the verse is bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. There's a sense of ongoing Christian discipleship and discipline in view there. And it suggests to me that there are two ways, broadly speaking, in which we might exasperate our children. We might exasperate them by too much heavy discipline, or we might exasperate them by a complete lack of discipline. And the exasperation or frustration will take different forms. It's easy to imagine both circumstances. The situation with a heavy-handed dad who's just unable to tolerate even the slightest infraction of a whole series of fairly onerous rules. Or perhaps more subtly, the exasperation that comes from the inconsistent application of house rules. Children just go along perfectly fine, it seems, living in a particular way, and then suddenly there's an explosion from the father department over something which seemed to be okay yesterday. The inconsistent and overbearing application of house rules, or whatever they are, can be tremendously frustrating for children. They're not sure where they stand. And in situations where that's happened, an apology is appropriate. It's perfectly right, perfectly fine. And actually it's a good thing for our children to see us apologising to them when we have been inconsistent or when we have been overbearing in our attempts to discipline and disciple them. So keep that in mind. At the same time as keeping in mind, of course, the other way in which it's possible to exasperate our kids with no discipline at all. I remember the story told to me by a dear friend who was, as a young girl, she was cycling home one night from a party or something where she'd been with her friend. She was cycling home with another friend and it was getting close to 10 o'clock or something, and this friend of mine was pedalling furiously on her bike to try and get home, and her friend was trying to keep up, saying, "What's the rush? What's the hurry? What are you trying to get home for?" And my friend said, "Well, I told my mum and dad that I'd be back by 10. They want me to be back home by 10 o'clock, and I don't want to be late." And my friend's friend said, "Well, I wish my mum and dad cared when I got in the evening." You see what's going on there? There's a sense of frustration, disappointment, exasperation from that young girl that her parents just don't care. Her parents just don't set boundaries. Her parents just don't give any guidance, don't paint the sides of the trail in bright white paint so that she knows where to walk. Instead, they leave her to wander around, and even she knows eventually if she's wandering around in a wilderness without guidance, she's going to fall into a ditch and get stuck there. We don't want our kids to be like that, do we? Let's not leave them without boundaries. Let's just make the boundaries clear and then apply them consistently and graciously and prayerfully. Don't provoke our children to anger. Hope that's helpful. The Lord bless you, and bye for now.